Welcome to Straight from the Source with Haley Watson. Our guest today is former Chico Unified Trustee Matt Tennis. Thanks for joining us, Matt.
A pleasure being here. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, gosh, you've been off of the school board for what, 6 months?
Since the end of 2024.
Okay.
So, yeah.
And you initially were elected during the pandemic, right?
Yes, that's right.
What inspired you to want to get involved?
The school shutdowns.
Yeah.
You know, that was such an affront to me. Everyone knew that children, especially younger children, but really all children, were not, as a demographic, particularly vulnerable to COVID. You know, this was one of the first news items associated with it, you know, when it was all kind of a mystery and emerging. One thing that was clear from the medical community was that kids were not particularly vulnerable. There are, of course, exceptions. But so school is so totally central to our life in modern American society that to take the COVID virus as a pretext for shutting down the entire school system, which is so central to modern American life, I was extremely offended and still am that the powers that be would do that at every level of government, including local, but also statewide and national. You know, and that's what motivated me to get involved, because I wanted to be a total pit bull.
Yeah.
You know, just advocating for something that, you know, not nearly enough people were able to do in a, you know, an effective way. And because of some of my political background, I knew that I had a skill set, you know, and a passion, and that this was something that I could do.
Now, you were in the minority, right?
Oh,
in
big
terms
time.
of how you felt about this
when
on
I
the-
was
on the board.
elected, when I, sorry to interrupt you,
No.
when I was elected, I was the only, you know, I mean, I guess I would call myself a family advocate. I was the only family advocate on the board. Everybody else was, you know, was a member of the teachers' union. I believe in actual real time or retired.
So do you feel like you were effective? Do you feel like the things that you wanted to, the voice that you wanted to be for your constituents and the things that you felt passionately about, do you think you saw progress and change?
So if we're just talking about, you know, was I a powerful voice? Absolutely. Okay. I mean, you know, somebody needed to be there representing all the people who were getting, you know, screwed over, basically. And I think I did a good job representing those people, you know. So from that standpoint, I have no regrets. I am, you know, at the time, and even kind of more so retrospect, disillusioned by how rigged the game is in terms of controlling local education policy, you know, and school board politics.
Explain more what you mean by that. Rigged by who and for what point?
Well,
to what
in
end?
terms of rigged by who, you know, I mean, many people at different times and in different contexts have complained about campaign finance, you know, and you know, how hard it is to get someone elected to serve in any
Even at the
elected
local
body.
level? Even like
Especially
Chico
at the
Unified
local body.
campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
There was no political machine more powerful than, or there is no, I should say, there is no political machine that has more direct influence over its, you know, its community than the Chico Unified Teachers Association.
Interesting.
Not just because of them or anything unique about them.
Okay.
What it is it's a formula that is playing itself out all up and down California, you know, and probably many parts of America. But it pretty much amounts to machine politics, you know. I mean, you've got one of the largest employers in, you know, the Chico area, if not the single largest employer.
And this is the union
Probably
group.
is. I'm referring to Chico Unified School District.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And between two, you know, unions that represent those employees, you've got the Chico Unified Teachers Association, which is affiliated with the California Teachers Association, and then you've got the California School Employees Association, which is kind of just a lesser actor, but still very, very relevant. And you know, so every single one of those employees, they don't have to make political contributions. There's just a computer algorithms that just take money out of each and every paycheck and funnel it into political action committees that then spend, you know, tens of thousands of dollars. And in the case of the most recent election in late 2024, you know, it was in excess of $80,000 they spent for 2 school board seats. just there's 5 trustee areas in town, and between these 2 seats that were up, $80,000. I mean, so they just buried
Yeah.
the
And you,
us. I
know
guess
that
I
you
should say.
provided me some documentation.
Yeah, just to show you so you have
yeah,
it,
in
you
case
know.
people are interested in looking into this, because we don't have time to
Sure.
vet the
Yeah,
information right
fine.
now.
Yep.
But I will make
Yeah.
that available in the link to this if somebody wants to look into it
Yeah.
themselves.
Also, they can feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah.
Anyone who's interested, I'm happy to provide more details on that. But no, I mean, to not to belabor that point, but suffice to say, it's really tough to run for school board as somebody who just wants to stand up and say, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight that.
Yeah.
That thing that I described with those computer algorithms funneling that money into political action committees who are going to totally hate you, right? And everything that goes along with that. You're going to be up against a powerful political machine, if you want to run for school board. So if you think you want to do that and you want to represent families and kids, where's the camera? Anyway, then you've got to be the sort of person who's not afraid to stand up in front of, and be on TV and,
Yeah.
and have mail run against you and stuff like
Interesting.
that, because that's the way it is.
So I'm just curious, and I want to talk about other things besides just this, but
Oh,
I
yeah.
am curious what you believe the motivation to be behind these unions, whoever is funneling the money toward a certain direction, to what end, to what point? If you don't
Yeah.
think it's representing the families who they serve,
Mm-hmm.
what is being served?
The short answer, which I'll give you in one word, and when I do it, I don't want to disparage or diminish from the genuine contribution that many, 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 if not most employees of the school district, including teachers. Hey, look, I am a product of the Chico Unified School District, and I had great teachers when I was in there. I had some marginal ones, but look, I know there are great teachers in Chico Unified. But in a word, to answer your question, on whose behalf is this machine acting?
Right.
And the answer is, in a word, bureaucracy. A bureaucracy.
And what does that even
It is an
mean?
established bureaucracy
I mean, there's
that protects itself and perpetuates itself. And if you try to take on that bureaucracy or diminish it or dismantle it in any way, you run up against the political side of it. And that's what these political action committees represent.
I mean, I've always heard that if you're looking at what drives something, it's always follow the money, right? Where is there money to be made, or who's being kept in power,
Yeah.
and why?
Yeah, that's a very real aspect of it. And it would be an oversimplification, again, to say that, oh, yeah, Chico Unified is just a big, heartless bureaucracy. Well, that's false. That'd be totally false. But it's real enough that if you want to try to make a difference, like I did, you're going to run up against some very, very powerful forces that are very established, and in all likelihood, you're going to lose.
So how did you get elected?
How I got elected was because it was the COVID shutdown. And so there were a lot of parents and grandparents and people who truly, really care about their kids or kids in general. It became a very high on the radar issue. And as a candidate, I latched on to that issue, and that was the thing I was going to rely on, basically, to propel me into success. That was in a time, by the way, when we ran district-wide, all over the district, whereas now, for reasons I won't get into, they've been redistricted and it's been chopped up into these 5 distinct trustee areas. So it was a different time. So I was able to appeal to a broad swath of people in the greater Chico area, many of whom live on the outskirts of town and stuff like that, newer areas. And so basically, just because of how high profile it was, that's how I was able to find success.
Yeah. And do you think that the districting shaped the current board right now that we have? And what do you think of the current board we have?
To answer your first question, yes, I do think it shaped it, but would things be any different if we were still elected at large as we were 6 years ago or whenever I decided to run? I guess more like 5 years ago. Probably not, and that's because apathy, public and voter apathy, is such a huge part of politics at any level. Most people, they just want to live their lives. If you're a a household, however, with 2 teachers for parents, I mean, school policy is your, religion
Well,
sometimes,
but I think, so many of us are parents, though,
Yeah.
right? So this is whoever is going to be running our schools and making decisions that affect our kids. I don't know what the statistics are on how many people in Butte County or in Chico and in the district area are parents. I would say a lot of us, and a lot of us feel like there's a lot at stake when it comes to this sort of thing.
Yeah, yes and no. I agree with you, but then I don't. A big part of school and education policy today is childcare. That's
Yeah.
a talking point that you don't hear very often.
What, it just functions
But
as
it
childcare?
functions as childcare. On one level, we're getting an education and we're spending all this money that comes down from the federal government and from the state government and local property taxes too. And this funds public school. And in most contexts, we like to talk about it like, oh, this is education, is
Right.
what this is. But the underpinning truth is that a lot of what happens is childcare. It is a parent dropping their kid off at school, sayonara, and going off to work or, probably to work.
Yeah.
And so when all of a sudden parents and families don't have that, or it's taken away from them through some farcical thing like
Right.
the COVID shutdown, then people become all of a sudden something that they were fairly apathetic about potentially, all of a sudden is elevated to the biggest pain in the rear they can possibly imagine.
You think that parents who were really upset about that home learning weren't so much upset about the fact that, okay, my kid is now depressed, they're not actually learning anything. You think that a lot of it was just the burden of having to take care of your own kid?
Well, probably more accurate to say that the burden of not being able to put food on the table. Because who's going to care for their child
Yeah.
while they are earning a living for their family?
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's how I would put
and
it.
that's the thing. It's like, right, we can't make generalizations. I'm sure some people felt that, and then others were just genuinely, like for me, I saw, I have 2 stepsons, and one did okay with the virtual learning and was able to still, and another really struggled with it.
Yeah.
And it was painful to watch.
Yeah.
And they were old enough where it's like, well, I could go to
Yeah.
work and leave them at home. It wasn't a pain in the butt for us in terms of like having them be cared for, because they were old
Yeah.
enough to take care of themselves, but it was just painful to see
Yeah.
them so
No,
depressed.
they were damaged.
Yeah.
There was a study that came out sort of toward the beginning of this whole debacle that actually showed how you will be shaving years off kids' lives by not having them in school. And I talked about this study, numerous times at school board meetings. People could not have cared less. They could not have cared less because, the battle lines were drawn and they knew what side they were on.
Yeah.
And they were on the side that was going to shut down schools as long as possible.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's the whole team mentality thing that is so big in our country is something that I'll never quite understand because, maybe it's just because it's part of my job is to try to continue to keep that open mind,
Yeah.
seek new information, and try to see where, I like to assume that 50% of our country isn't crazy, as each side seems to think, right? And so I
Right.
try to get the perspectives from both sides.
Yeah.
And I can see the heart of people and see where they're coming from relatively often. And I do think that passion a lot of times drives decision makings, even if it doesn't make sense for us. And, for you, I know I'm sure part of the reason you cared is you're also a father, right? An adoptive father, and
Yes.
you had an
Yeah.
accidental real.
Yep.
Are any of your kids still in school right now?
Oh, yeah, all of them.
Okay, so they're young, Chico Unified.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, one of them is at Core Butte right
Okay.
now. So that's actually associated with, well, it's partly Chico Unified also, but it's
Okay.
also Butte County Office of Education
Okay.
administered.
And so, given your perspective, I assume that when you drop them off, it's not just childcare. You feel like, do you feel happy about the education that they're receiving?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. My school that all my kids have gone through and that I myself went through as a child, Parkview Elementary School, has always been, an awesome neighborhood school. The people who work there are just absolutely lovely, and we've had excellent teachers.
Yeah.
For sure.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, your whole life has not been Chico Unified School Board. You've had a pretty interesting life, actually. One thing that stood out to me is learning that you went solo backpacking through India.
Oh, yeah.
What did you think of that experience?
If you ever want to see how the other half lives, you should go spend a long period of time by yourself in India.
Is that why you selected that country of all places to explore?
I had been a foreign exchange student in Israel for a year, my junior year in college, and when I went away to become a foreign exchange student, my plan was to go to the UK for that summer following.
Right. That's a more typical backpacking route.
But Israelis, they all go into do military service after high school or college or something like that, and they very often don't want to go to clean, easy to get around, safe countries. They like to travel to places in the far reaches of the world.
Yeah.
And at the time, this is in the mid-90s, India was like the top of the list where they all liked to go.
Yeah.
And so I started saying to myself, Matt, you're always going to be able to go to the UK if you want to, but you're not going to always be able to go do India. And so that's why I did that.
Okay. What do you think? Give me one interesting experience there that stands out to you.
Well, the story that all my kids and everybody likes to hear over and over, I'm just not going to tell because it would take too long. But basically, I went to a really fancy restaurant in Darjeeling, India, and they didn't speak any English, so I had this whole several course meal.
Okay.
And at the beginning of the meal, I thought they had brought me a finger bowl to wash my hands in. Okay. I was a dumb 21-year-old, Anyway, that turned out to be the clear soup with herbs that I read later on. And the staff was I was the only customer in the entire restaurant.
Oh my gosh.
So they were all watching me and attending to my every need. There was a piano player, a wait staff, the kitchen, they were all there just for me.
Okay.
And my it was probably about $13.
Yeah.
That was what the economies of scale were like. Anyway, so I had washed my hands in the soup.
Oops.
And we got a laugh out of it. But yeah, that's my best story from India.
Oh my gosh. And that's something about travel that I always try to seek out when I travel. Yeah, it's fun to be a tourist, right? But I think that the real benefit of travel comes from trying to just live like the locals live and find out not where the best tourist restaurant is, but where do people who live here actually eat?
Yeah.
And what are the different customs and cultures? Do we sit on the floor when we eat, or do we wash our hands in our soup bowl?
Another great one. I'll make this so fast. I sat down at this crowded restaurant where people really eat. This is an example of that. The other one is not an example. That's not where people normally eat. But anyway, so I sat at a table with 3 other men, and a guy said, we're talking, this is in remote India. And he's like, oh, I've been to America, and he told me some story about how he visited his relative. I said, well, nice to meet you. And so I reached out to shake his hand, and he shook mine. But the problem is there, you eat with your right hand.
Okay.
So my hand is all slimy. His hand was all slimy. Anyway, he was polite. He shook my hand, but that was so out of place.
Now,
it was just a reaction. I mean, I just did what came naturally.
Is the handshake something that they would do in India, or he did it because he knew you were American?
Maybe. I think they would handshake, maybe. But me being American had nothing to do with it. The point is, and you would not shake with the left hand, but the point was, he was eating his dinner. Yeah. I was about to eat my dinner. So he's got a slimy hand. Yeah. I've got a slimy hand. This is not a time to shake hands. But you're just some dumb 21-year-old and you don't know.
Yeah. All right. Interesting. Yeah. So, India, that was backpacking. Yeah. Before then, though, you were studying in
Israel.
Yeah.
Hebrew University.
Why did you choose that?
I had a friend here in Chico. Grew up with him. Eitan Schiffman was his name. He lives in Israel now. His father is Irv Schiffman, who's a professor at Chico State at the time. Okay. Wonderful family. They're like a second family to me because they actually were in Israel while I was there. My friend Eitan, he just said, hey, I'm going, it was Christmas break the previous year, and he said, hey, we're all going to be in Israel next year studying at Hebrew University, and you ought to come do it. I'd never occurred to me. I was
You're not Jewish.
Nope. I was a evangelical, Chico, middle American sort of a guy, but but he just sort of mentioned it to me, and I'd always been kind of a fan of the movie Lawrence of Arabia. So anyway, it just sort of, the seed just kind of sprouted, and I jumped on it, and man, it just completely changed my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about the perspective you have from that experience on, at least then, at that time, what the Israeli people are like? And, was there, I mean, we know that the issues that are happening now, right, between Israel and Palestine, I mean, this is not a new thing. It's been going on for forever.
Well,
what was it like then?
Where I lived in the dorms, Hebrew University has, it's the largest university in Israel. They got multiple campuses, and there are Arabs as well as Israeli, Jews who go there. Okay, so it's a secular university in Israel, and so I was rubbing elbows with all different kinds of people, when I was over there from all over the world, but in particular, both Jews and Arabs. It was wonderful to be in that context and to interact with everybody. And there was a peace process going on then, just as there, I guess, should be today.
Working toward peace in some
or something.
capacity?
Yeah, things are definitely at a low point in the peace process realm right now. But that was at a time when there was maybe more optimism, for a two-state solution.
Right.
And I did some traveling in the West Bank and really hung out with Arabs a lot.
Yeah, you learned enough of the language that you could kind of
get around. And
yeah.
I traveled around the Middle East. I was in Egypt, Jordan, Syria while I was in the neighborhood. So yeah, I really saw I saw it from a perspective that most people don't get to see. But you asked about the Israeli people and what I thought about them. That's a challenging question to answer because you've got your hardcore religious Israeli Jews, you've got your sort of Zionist element, and there's different varieties of that. There's a religious side of that. There's a very political side of it. There's a historical side of that. But they're just like any other people, except they live with kind of the shadow of military conflict and just kind of hovering over them kind of all the time.
Yeah.
And the same goes for the I guess the Arab groups that are there also. So I was at a time when kind of that wasn't overly hot and heavy. I'm sure the flavor is a little different today than it was then, but it's always been kind of ever present. Since around 1900 or so, there's been a kind of a fomenting of the growing presence of the nation of Israel, if you will.
Is there anything else that your experience there that you could use to kind of maybe like if there are misconceptions right now? Because I think a lot of people have this idea of what life is like in Israel or what's going on in Gaza just based on what they see in the news.
Yeah.
I mean, do you see any glaring misconceptions?
No. I mean, for me, reading about the events that are going on in Israel right now, being way over here on the other side of the world as we are in little Chico, is kind of like reading about some important conflict that happened in the history books, where you can almost kind of read the history of it, and you can kind of put yourself there and imagine the real issues that these people have, and the real issues that these people have, and how kind of legitimate they both are, and how one event led to another, and it shook out, and here was the result. Yeah. When I read about what's going on in Israel, that's kind of how I feel about it. I know that there's so much pain on all sides. Yeah. Yeah. And that's going to kind of be that way. For a time.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like there's an obvious solution on the table.
Not right
that's
now,
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, another thing I've recently learned about you is that you're a third-generation rice farmer, and agriculture is such a huge component of our life up here in Northern California, and so is water, right?
Yeah,
Sharing our water, using the water that we get, storing the water that doesn't go out to the ocean.
Yeah.
Is the land sinking as we pump water? Where do things stand right now with water management, in your opinion?
Well, as Mark Twain said, whiskey's for drinking,
Yeah.
water's for fighting over. And water is a all-important, scarce commodity that, even if people don't have a vested interest with it, they're totally using it and depending on it all the time directly,
Right.
like a farmer is.
Right.
If no water, you've got no food for you can't grow your crop and you can't sell it and all that. And we all need food, of course. So
We gotta take showers.
So valuable.
Gotta
But
wash
we
your
all take
hair.
showers.
Yeah.
We sometimes water our lawns, or maybe our school waters its lawn,
Right.
and these things are valuable to each and every one of us.
Yes.
And so each person has a a stake in the future, to varying degrees. It's scarce. But there's a lot more water in California than you realize.
Yeah.
The other states, like in the middle America, and especially as you get toward the southern central United States, like Texas and stuff, forget it. I
Right.
mean, we talk about droughts in California, and they come and go, but man, we got it made in the shade with a glass of lemonade compared to
Right.
most most of the square miles of America are arid.
Yeah.
Wait, I don't know about that, but a huge swath of America lives in an arid wasteland of some form or another. But we're close to the ocean, and the Sierras catch a lot of moisture that comes in off the ocean.
I find it so interesting how much man manipulates our
yeah.
environment. It's
Yeah.
an incredible thing when you think about the history of California and how we created these giant reservoirs
Oh, yeah.
that weren't actually there.
Yeah.
And we can share and
But
ship water.
that's all
and-
from another era.
Yeah.
All that big infrastructure that we all
Right.
completely are
Well,
dependent
Sites
upon.
Reservoir.
It was all, which is not built.
Right, but I'm saying
Yeah.
it's still a thing today, right?
Yeah,
Trying
but
to
it's
manipulate
it's
water.
not there yet.
No, yeah.
I mean, everything that we depend on up here
Yeah.
and in much of California was built like back in the 60s,
Yeah.
and before.
Well, what do you
know?
think about all these efforts from the state, to create these groundwater sustainability agencies
Mm-hmm.
and hold people accountable for how they store water
Yeah.
or do, better use it?
Yeah, I don't want to disparage those efforts,
Uh-huh.
and that infrastructure. And sort of much of what you're describing is policy work.
Yeah.
It's not actually, you're not actually creating a new drop of water.
Right.
You're just kind of accounting for it in different ways,
Yeah.
and assigning it here and there. No, so you tell me, what the cost per gallon is, benefit of doing that,
Right.
versus building, a Lake Oroville,
Right.
which serves, all this economy and
Well, so you
and stuff.
support sites then, right? And would like
Absolutely,
to see it? Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah.
What do you think about the idea that some of these big farmers are buying up the land,
Oh, good question.
putting their wells so deep into the ground that people who are small farmers or just homeowners with a well, their wells don't reach the groundwater anymore?
Yeah, that has been known to happen. Not so much around here. It does happen some. It's been known to happen, I'll say. It's not like a permanent reality for many users that have come over the years
Yeah.
up here. But it has come in fits and starts. Like during a drought, all these farmers in this area will start pumping to irrigate their crops, and then wells might start going dry.
Yeah.
Down in the southern part of the San Joaquin Valley, that's a bigger deal and more in your face. And the short answer is that those people need to be compensated.
Yeah.
They've got a legitimate right to do the things that they need to do with that groundwater.
Right.
And we can't be expected to live in an America or in a California where might is right, and
Right.
some corporation that can drill a 2,000-foot well, and if your well goes dry, that's just your problem. No, that's it can't be that way.
Do you think it's a problem that there are reports that the ground is actually sinking?
Oh, it's not just reports. It's totally
It's
documented,
happening.
and has been happening for decades and decades. We've
Yeah.
known about ground subsidence,
Right.
resulting from groundwater pumping. It's not really an issue here. The different, the soil stratas or whatever, how the ground is constructed in different places naturally, is what plays a meaningful role in
Right.
how much that occurs.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sobering to think that
Yeah.
pumping groundwater can collapse an aquifer and therefore lower the ground level above it. Yeah.
Crazy.
That's one of the negative impacts that the state of California is regulating right
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
We're fortunate to be pretty much shielded from that here.
Things are going pretty well though for rice farmers in terms of the current situation. I mean, rice is growing fine with the weather that we're having. I hear problems about nuts, but never about, oh, it's a bad year for rice. Like, what are some of the challenges for growing rice?
Well, the price is not very good for rice right now.
Why do you think?
I think the global unrest in places like the Middle East, that's a historic market for California medium grain, which is what we grow around here. The Ukraine situation, sort of things like that kind of can cast a pall,
Yeah.
Over large areas of population where you're not able to sell your commodity in that
Right.
environment. Let's see, when Australia competes with us in the rice realm, and
Yeah.
so if they have a good year and produce a lot of rice, and then, yeah, that's a short answer.
Yeah, I mean, very complex, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, the grain prices are very complex.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. So
Way
and
above my pay grade,
yet,
that's for sure.
yet another thing on your resume. You were a speechwriter for Governor P. Wilson.
Actually, I was writing ceremonial messages and proclamations.
So-
I was like kind of maybe in the writing realm, I was a notch below. He might have read my stuff once or twice.
Should somebody who, and this is every single politician, I'm sure, at a certain level has a speechwriter, but should they, like if somebody is going to be our voice and we elect them, shouldn't they speak to us from their voice?
Absolutely, and I think that's why debates are so important.
Yeah.
I mean, if we hadn't had the debate with Trump and Biden, and I'm not making any big grand sweeping statements here,
It was
unless you want me
It
to.
was eye-opening,
But yeah, that Biden's performance in that debate was just so telling. As is now is a matter of common understanding.
Right.
So yeah, they got to be able to stand up there and deliver the goods.
Yeah.
Us politicians.
I think that's something that's really interesting about this day and age where there are so many platforms for media,
Yeah.
is that, there is definitely the chance of, call it misinformation or just fake things with AI, fake
Oh,
videos.
yeah. Oh,
Is
yeah.
that a real person or is that just a
No.
robot that looks like the
Totally
person?
important.
But I think there are also more opportunities for people to really get to know the people who they vote for,
Yeah.
the people who they choose to represent them.
Well, there should be.
Yeah.
There should be more opportunities. But I like to think that this is maybe the bright side, or looking for the silver lining in our AI future, which I'm an early adopter of AI and I use it on the ranch and stuff a lot. I think that one of humans' most striking characteristics is our ability to adapt.
Yeah.
And I think that voters, to the extent that we have voters, and people will be more tuned in to looking for the real thing.
Yeah.
When things like money are really valuable, when you're facing external threats as a community or as a country, and you're looking for real solutions, I think at that point, people's attention will be hopefully drawn away from the bells and whistles of the manipulated internet world, and hopefully they'll look for the authentic experience, like the debate. Like debates they're fun and they attract a lot of attention, but I think they might become more important
Oh, yeah.
down the road,
Yeah.
because there is so much manipulation and phony stuff that this is a forum where you can really get down and see the real person, and maybe voters will really be just extra interested in that.
Yeah. That's,
You know?
I mean, that's
I hope so.
Right.
I love polemical debate and argumentation and all the fur flying and people being passionate about politics. When it comes to just free speech, I love it.
Yeah.
I can't get enough of it, because to me this is where real issues get communicated. And in theory, I mean, I'd like to live in a world where people don't care how old or funny looking or somebody nerdy somebody
Right.
might look,
Right.
but just is this person gonna represent me and my values?
Yeah, absolutely. And the only way we can do that is if we actually get to know people for who they truly are, and not the facade that some PR person or image creator has said, well, this is what voters want. We think you can kind of fit it.
Oh, man.
And we're going to
Yeah.
make you look like it. It's like, no, I just
Yeah.
want the real person with the, and if, that's something about Bernie Sanders, who, nothing to do with politics one
Yeah.
way or another,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
remember he came here and he spoke at Chico State and he was eating a little hot dog and got a little mustard on his tie.
Uh-huh.
He didn't care.
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it
yeah.
didn't tarnish anyone's opinion of him
That's
because,
right.
hey, he's so Bernie.
You know what? And I love that.
Yeah.
I love
Authenticity.
I love listening to Bernie when he comes on the radio, but similarly, and this is going to sound, I don't know how it's going to come across, but, I like listening to authentic people. Truthfully, even inauthentic people, I like listening to just because the way I'm wired is let's just take Trump, for example. I get a lot of nourishment from sifting through the things that people say and kind of, where is this person really coming from when they say this? Why are they saying this? What are the real values that are behind it? Whether I agree with those values or not, you know. I love just contemplating the whole rhetorical equation. You know? So a guy like Bernie, hey, it's fun for me to listen to because it's just something to sit there and sort of dissect and pick apart. And what do I agree with? What do I not agree with? Does this guy have a point here on this and that? Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
So I like to think that, hey, people. It's like, what's driving your passion? Like, why are you passionate about it? And what's driving you more so than do we agree or disagree?
Yeah.
But because I think a lot of times people maybe want the same thing, but they're just come in from a different perspective of how to get it.
You're not asking me this question, but I'm going to comment on what you just said.
Okay.
Who is this person? What do they want? Blah, blah. I mean, you're kind enough to bring me in here to interview me. So I'm just going to tell you what it is that drives me.
Okay.
To want to think the things I do and do the things that I do. And the answer, in a word, is truth.
Yeah.
I want to speak truth to my children. Okay? I want to be able to give them the most unvarnished, accurate picture of what is going on in the world around them.
Okay.
I do not want to drive a political agenda with them. I do not want them to grow up and be, Republicans or some such thing. I want them to be able to grasp and to have a passion for truth. Yeah.
I have a question about that statement, though. Do you think it is possible for there to be different versions of the truth based on someone's perception? If you and I sat and we, watched a play, right, and we both had a different takeaway from it. Was that person a terrible actor? Were they a good actor? Was that person just, giving it half their energy and not doing? We have different experiences with the way that we interact with the world, and so what to me is truth to you may not be. Do you think that that's a possibility?
First reaction, not really. I think that you might have a preference. We look at a certain actor,
Right.
Take Jack Nicholson, for example.
Right.
He's maybe a good example because, I've known people, one of my best friends, like Jack Nicholson, is his favorite actor of all time. I mean, he's completely into it and all that, but other people I'm intimate with, would think that he was kind of a seedy character and not like his demeanor and the roles that he plays. And there's a little bit of truth in every good joke or in every moment of acting. A little bit of the real person is there, which is why they're able to deliver this character. And so, but objectively, Jack Nicholson is a great actor.
Right.
So even if you found him to be unseemly, which you haven't said anything like that, I would say, hey, well, you think what you want, but that guy's, he's nailing it. He's delivering this character.
Yeah.
So no, I think that usually things are a matter of objective truth.
Yeah. I mean, that's our principle here. Journalism is the passionate pursuit of truth. Absolutely.
Yes.
But sometimes I do find that it's interesting. People who I interview will have very different takes on what that truth is and trying to get down to the core facts of it. Yeah, it's tough. It's a huge challenge for our whole society these days.
And there's a whole industry built around it too. I mean, the whole spin doctor thing is. I'm sure you've talked to many people who were, trying to spin you in a political context, and so you have to be like a hard-hitting journalist, Haley, in order to come back at that and direct the conversation, in the right way. Which generally, I think that from what I've seen, you do a good job at that.
It can be a challenge. Well, before we wrap up, let's just talk about you and what comes next. I know you do embroidery. Essentially,
No.
Is that part of a business or not anymore?
Maybe you're alluding to my wife's business, which I'm involved in a bit. Is we print.
Printing and embroidery and that kind of stuff.
No, it's not embroidery.
Not
It's a vintage,
right.
antique letterpress. It's called letterpress, and it's just a really craft-intensive, old-school way of producing stationery.
Okay. So you're still working on farming is your main thing.
Totally.
And she's doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you good to just continue running your business in agriculture, and that's kind of what you see next? Are you done with politics? Is what I'm trying to get at.
For all time, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, right now I'm very much occupied with the family farm, and I don't see me. Never say
never know.
never.
Yeah.
But it would be in the vein of community involvement. I'm not going to abandon my career and my life and everything to run off and try to build some big political career. It's just kind of community activism would be what I would be looking to do, if anything.
Okay.
Yeah.
And closing thoughts on the rice farming. Are you a fan of rice? Do you love rice?
Oh,
and
yeah.
Is there a best, most flavorful type of rice that grows here in Northern California we should all buy?
Yes, California medium grain rice, which is what you get in your sushi bowls, your teriyaki bowls, the Asian style. But it's also good in any other context. But yes, that's the best rice in the whole world, and you should buy lots of that.
So not the Uncle Ben's 3-minute one that I make my husband eat sometimes.
I don't judge. I don't judge people for their rice choices.
I mean, it's just so fast.
Yeah.
3 minutes.
Yeah, parboiled rice. But how long does normal rice take? 10, 15 minutes.
Okay.
So
we can make time.
Yeah.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much for being here. We
Yep.
really appreciate it.
A pleasure being here. Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. In the beginning of this interview, our guest, Matt Tennis, mentioned campaign finance issues, and I did mention that we were going to provide that documentation. If you want to check it out, go to actionnewsnow.com, click on the news tab, and then news links will have it there for you if you'd like to peruse them. And always, we're so grateful for you taking the time to be with us, and I'd love to hear who you'd like to hear from next. You can always send me an email or send us a message, and also please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify as well.